Welcome to episode 154 of the How'd It Happen podcast, hosted by Mike Malatesta. In this episode, Mike welcomes George Powell, the CEO of Summit Diagnostics.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show today. I'm with George Powell today. George, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really happy to have you. It's kind of weird how we ended up getting connected. George is partners with my friend Dan Lavicek in some businesses. I'm not sure how it all works, but I know Dan through YPO, and then Justin Breen, who I know from Strategic Coach, ends up doing some work with George and Dan's company on a very significant issue for them, and then Justin connects George and I, which is just like a really circular way to get it done, but a lot
of networking, which was nice.
Yeah, a lot of networking. Yeah, perfect.
It works, which is great news.
It definitely works. It definitely works. So here we are today. And George, I start every show with the same simple question: how did it happen for you?
Well, as you mentioned, my partner Dan Lavicek, we've been partners for quite a long time now. It's been about 15 years since we started this company, Summit Diagnostics. And what we do is we were started off as a contract sales force in the toxicology business, building awareness towards opioid addiction and rehab and recovery. Along the way, we decided to get a little bit more involved. We bought a couple of laboratories, and one of the labs that does testing for us was a lab out, and we still own it, is in Honolulu, Hawaii. And basically, when I looked at the Hawaii situation, it was one of those situations where I kind of had a dual purpose. One was, geez, this looks like a great area for business, and two is, I want to live in Hawaii someday. So it was a little bit selfish, but at the same time, we said, just this is a really good opportunity. And like any other state in the country, they're no worse than any of the others, but there's always a drug issue going on. And there were no drug laboratories out there to the scope that we could provide. So at the time, we really had a nice situation where we were providing a service to most of the accounts out there that was very much needed in monitoring drug addiction, prescription management type situations. So we put that out there. And first couple of years, like any business, we struggled a little bit. And then we hired a couple of different people, and it didn't work out with some of them. And then we finally found this young lady who, frankly, to this day, she's probably one of the best sales reps I've ever had, which could end up being a curse. We'll get into the story a little bit more. But we hired her, and she came in, and she just did a bang-up job. And to this day, I can't say enough good things about her selling ability and how she got things going. But somewhere along the way, and the trip of trying to get this all moving forward, we had 4 partners out there. It was myself, Dan, and 2 other gentlemen that are doctors on the island. And she slowly started doing some strange things. And I look back at it now, and what it was she was more or less dividing the herd. So she would provide some misinformation to our partners out there. And the first part that she kind of did was separate them from us and made them more of a persona non grata. And we just, hearing stories about how they were coming in and doing things to the laboratory they shouldn't be in. So finally we got them to a point where we just don't go in the laboratory anymore because you're messing things up. And that caused a bit of a rift, and the rift got wider and wider and wider. So as time went on, and she's still doing well and making a lot of money and really providing a great service. But at the same time, now I noticed that she's kind of driving a little bit of a rift between Dan and myself, which after 15 years is very, very, very difficult to do. But she would tell a story on one side and then tell a story on the other side. Well, long story short, about January of 2018, I noticed that she had changed her title on her Facebook page, and it said former director of sales for Aloha Technology. Now, okay, I don't know anything about her leaving the company, but Dan is basically running her at this point because we didn't want our rift to grow any wider. And we figured too many cooks in the kitchen, might be causing the problem here. So I called Dan and I said, did Heidi leave? And he said, no, she hasn't. I said, well, you should check out her Facebook page because she's now former director of sales. Maybe she's just, now that she's more in the laboratory and running the lab, maybe she's just looking at more of an operations manager. So he called her, and I'm watching her Facebook page evaporate before my eyes. It just disappeared. So really? I said to Dan at that point, I think we've got a problem and we need to keep an eye on her because there's something not right. Needless to say, we fast forward about 6 months, and the laboratory failed the CAP inspection, which is College of American Pathologists, which is something that you really do need to have out there. And there's no reason to ever fail this because our methodologies were fantastic. But we could see things were happening, losing some accounts here and there. On a Friday afternoon in June, right before we got to the 4th of July holiday, she called us and said that everybody in the lab had quit and that we were going to have to shut the laboratory down until we could get people all reorganized and put back together again. And we were stunned. And I said, there's something not right here. So
George, was she believable when she was on the phone with you talking?
She's one of the most believable people you'll ever imagine in your life. There was always a sense of urgency in everything that she did anyway. And it was a typical, very aggressive sales rep type approach that she always had. So it was always, you need to put my items in the front of everything else. So it didn't seem any different than the way she normally was, except for the fact that I kind of sniffed it out at the beginning of the year. And I thought there's just something not right here. So I ended up calling one of my competitors out there. And he answered the phone and he said, George Powell, he goes, I'm so disappointed you're not in the market anymore. And I said, what do you mean I'm not in the market anymore? He said, well, you sold the company to this company in California, NextGen. And I said, I didn't sell the company to anybody. And he said, yeah, you did. And I said, well, I think I would know if I sold the company to somebody else. And he said, well, geez, if you were going to sell it, I would hope you would have sold it to me. At least we're on a friendly basis. I don't know why you'd bring another competitor. I'm telling you, we didn't sell this. He said, you're serious. And he said, oh my God. He goes, I think you've got a real problem on your hands. So what we found out is that for the period of January, through that time period where she basically shut the lab down, that she was working for a competitor as well as working for us. And what she had done is she started diverting all resources and businesses that we had over to her new laboratory and never, ever told us a thing. Never. And, at the point where we like, well, how did we get duped on this? How did this potentially happen? So we just had to sit down and kind of analyze it. And I said, first things first, let's get to the story. What is the real story? So we went back to some of the employees that got laid off, and they were told that we had sold the company to NextGen, and there was paperwork with all the accounts that we had that were all moved over to this other company, and supposedly legitimately because we sold it. So she made up a complete story. And the people on the island believed it. And they believed it, number one, because she was the sales rep up there. And she's very convincing. Like I said at the beginning, she's an excellent sales rep. Mm-hmm. But there was no reason not to believe it at that point. So she just didn't think that we would probably retaliate and come back. We immediately hired an excellent counsel on the island, and Mark Valencia, and got to Mark and told him what had gone on. And we were able to get a very, very, very hard to get injunction. And we got them to stop the process of moving all that until we could get everything figured out. It took about 2 years, a lot of court cases and money and casework. But we finally did get a substantial settlement that really took care of everything. And she's been banned from entering any of our accounts for the next couple of years. So, but it's a Hollywood story because she really had kind of a double life going on. And then we found out that she was working for a pharmaceutical company at the same time and selling real estate. I don't know if she cloned herself or what, but boy, she had a lot of energy, I'll tell you.
Huh. So I'm glad you dove right into it there with your answer, because you laid down a bunch of stuff this is sort of the fear that really probably any entrepreneur, and not even any executive might have, is that their business or a portion of their business could be sabotaged by an employee, and not and sabotage in a very meaningful and significant way, and not see it coming.
Yeah.
all at the same time. So let's just lay down a little bit more context here. So you guys decided to start the lab because you were selling drug and alcohol testing and maybe some other testing on the island, but you had to ship it to the mainland to be analyzed or evaluated, or is that right?
Yeah, there's two traditional laboratories on the islands that did a lot of the clinical work, but toxicology work, if you wanted to be done in the state of the art way, which is using a technology called liquid chromatography, mass spectrometry, that had to be shipped to the mainland.
Okay.
So there were competitors out there, but they did not have brick and mortar on the island. So what we did, we actually these two doctors actually started the company. And we came in and helped support them, and then we ended up buying into it. What it did is it saved 48 hours on turnaround time of getting a specimen back, and that's really important when you're, giving pain medications out. You don't want to give too much out, so it changed the game out there. So we were the first ones.
Okay, and had the doctors hired this woman first, or did she come after you guys got involved? And in either case, how did that to transpire initially?
Yeah. Well, we ran the marketing side of it, so she was our hire. She was a nurse. She had a great pedigree, and and again, she's a fantastic salesperson, and for good reasons and bad reasons. But she just really she lit the lamp up, and very well respected in the organization until she did this. She knew her the subject matter very, very well. She was involved with the addiction and recovery community, which is a big part of what we do. We feel that you have to be part of that give back. You're not going to solve the problem unless you're involved with it, and you know exactly what the talk is, what the walk is out there. So she just knew that. She knew that community really well, and it's what gave her the confidence, I believe, to make her feel like she might be able to get away with something like that.
And she was with you how long before this process that you described started happening?
About 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah.
Okay. So long enough to, earn trust, right? Really, I mean, long enough to become part of the team. She
was part of the team. She was part of the management team. She knew intimate details, about finances and equipment and methodologies. She knew how to run a laboratory by the time she had done. She didn't when she walked in, but by the time she left, she knew a lot of the ins and outs of how to run a laboratory.
And this rift that she was causing amongst the team, not amongst you and Dan, I'll get to that later, but the rift that she was causing there, you mentioned that the eventual outcome of that was that she became the lab manager instead of a salesperson. I'm curious if I got that right, what made that sort of happen?
So she was really, because of her organizational skills, she was very good at the operations portion of this as well. So she was doubling up as basic operations and sales. Okay. There's not a giant population on the islands. Obviously it's not like the mainland, and there's not an infinite number of accounts to go to. So she was very comfortable in getting in there. And again, she understood the laboratory really well. We had lab managers there. One of the one gentleman we had, he left about a year prior to her, going into the spin. But and at that point, she more or less moved in and started doing a lot of the operational pieces of it. And so it gave her a lot more responsibilities. So she could hire any of the techs, she could hire the collectors. She knew enough about that to do it. Did she know about the laboratory? She never knew anything about the science of the laboratory, and was not responsible for that. We had a toxicologist responsible for that.
Okay. And I can imagine you guys thinking, oh, well, we lost our person, so she's willing to do it and has the bandwidth, apparently can do it. Why not? Right.
It was a kind of a temporary fix at the time. Yeah. So we figured, well, we're not going to get hurt by it. She knows how to move things around. She doesn't have to touch the science. So that's fine. She can't do too much damage as far as the science is concerned. And of course, the toxicologist is very well versed in how to run all that. So we were fairly comfortable with that.
And was the toxicologist or she responsible for that designation that you mentioned that's important for the operation of the lab?
No, the toxicologist was hired by us, and he actually doesn't have to be on site. He can be off site. He does review things. He can do it, internet wise, but he does have to make trips out there about 3-4 times a year.
Okay. Okay, so he wouldn't have been responsible for making sure that the lab maintained the certification that it needed that you mentioned.
He would have, yeah.
He would
He's
have.
responsible for the science part of that, yeah. So anything on the cap inspection, he would have been responsible for. But when they're running specimens and you're throwing a wrench into it, he can only read details. He's not going to see what's being thrown into the mix.
Oh, I see. So pretty much he was holding up his end of the bargain, but he didn't realize that there were these other.
He was as duped as all of us. Let's just put it that way.
Okay, well, there you go. That's a simple way to say it.
In fact, he was stunned, and when we did get to court, he did testify on our end. So,
okay, and this again, getting back to the rift that she was causing in the lab, was there no one else in the? Well, she was obviously controlling all of the communication too, so she was telling the story and creating the story at the same time. It sounds like where. There was no one else picking up the phone and saying, "Hey, George, there's something weird going on here."
What they did especially when you live on island, she's not Hawaiian, by the way, but she was part of the culture. She had been out there long enough. She was married to a gentleman who was a surfer. So that whole culture of, how they spend their leisure time, property owners, she was very well entrenched in that. So when you're in that culture, just like a Boston culture or a Milwaukee culture, you tend to believe the people you may be closest to. And that's what she did. So she started these stories with the two doctors and us that they were trying to run the show and push us out. And that they were coming by the office and distracting people and taking people out to lunch and getting them off their game. And of course, we're trying to run a business, and we would ask them and they would get a little offended, because they're just as much as part of this as we are. So the rifts just started smoldering. And finally she came to us. She goes, "I can't work here unless, these guys are not stopping in here. I don't want them stopping in here anymore. It distracts my crew." So we have the majority ownership. So we asked them to stop going in. Well, the rift got bigger, and it widened and widened and widened. And then it became a situation like we're not even going to talk to each other anymore. The moral to the story is that you really got to get to the heart of it before you could start saying, that they were actually doing this. And it took a long time to get by that, and we're trusting our employee. She's our eyes and ears there. And, we're giving her the right things to do, and she's following the protocols. Everything looked good. But as far as the rift went, boy, she just started it there, and it blew up.
And what about the rift that she was causing between you and Dan, your partner? What were the mechanics of that? Just so because she's obviously clever, right? And she's
brilliant.
Yeah. Said that, man, and a great salesperson. Yeah. But maybe devious too. I don't know. Well, probably. Yeah. But how did that? Why did she start that? And as far as and how did it actually? What were the mechanics of it?
I really do truly believe that the mechanics of what she was trying to do is to get what she wanted. And she wanted more and more and more all the time. And she realized that whenever there's partners, and especially as close as Dan and I am, and I'll tell you how we actually broke this and got us back together. It's an interesting story. It was a situation where, there's egos involved with anything that you do. That's just what humans do. We have a little bit of ego involved. So she would get on the phone and say something to Dan like, "Well, George doesn't want me to do this because, he feels that this is going on." And then Dan would say, "Well, I asked you to do that. So George shouldn't be interjecting on those type of things." And it got to that point where, finally I said, "Listen, Dan, I'm not going to get in the middle of this. Why don't you run it?" And Dan and I, although he grew up in Milwaukee and I grew up in Boston, they're like brothers. We've been together a long time at this point. So we know each other very well. We know our families. Came to my son's wedding. So, we know each other very, very, very well. Been on vacation together. So to have a lot of these things happening, it starts kind of shaking your faith. And she made I'll tell you, it was down to probably a weekend where we may have broken up.
No way.
Yeah, wow. It was very close. It was really, really close because she had just really woven this tapestry of deceit that, we couldn't overcome, and nobody knew who was telling the truth at that point. And a couple things started happening. At one point, we started talking to the other partners again, and one of them, Dr. Revlowski, said to me, "I think that she's up to something, and that she's driving a wedge. And I think we really need to look at this because we've got a great business. We're servicing the public out here. We're doing it the right way. We got to do a better job of talking to each other. This is our fault." So I said, "Well, she's my employee. I'm going to take the hit on this because we need to get to the bottom of it." And that's, of course, when I started finding the Facebook things and her changing her, profiles around and all those type of things. But my brother passed away, and I believe it was May of 18. And so my brother and I were very, very close, and Dan and my brother and his whole crew, we'd go on fishing trips together, and we had, just a very, very close relationship. And, Dan and I are not really talking at the time. And so I'm at the funeral home, and all of a sudden I feel a hand on my shoulder, and Dan Lavicek flew out from Milwaukee to Boston. Just,
Sure.
He grabbed me and he says, "Let's go for a quick walk." And we went out and we resolved our issues right then and there. And we said, okay, we just got to get our arms wrapped around Heidi. And then, of course, 2 months later, it basically, she knew it was when we were back together that was the end. And that's when she had to make her move.
So tell me about the gut punch.
Sorry, say again?
Tell me about the gut punch that came, 2 months later, where it's you got the call from, your competitor, colleague, or however you want to frame that up. But then you had to verify, right? So you get off the phone with that person, and it's like, well, wait a second. What do I do? How do I verify this? Right? I'm thinking this is what I would be thinking. What do I do? So,
and there's a certain amount of embarrassment that goes along with this as well, because you've not sold your company. You just got a bunch of information from a competitor that you did sell your company, and you've been sabotaged. And you've really been hit from behind. You don't know what's happening. So one thing I'm really good at is that I keep my cool on these things. Let's do this very methodically. Let's get the group of people that we had out there and talk to them first and see what they know. And we started piecemealing the story together, and slowly, piece by piece by piece, we started finding out, okay, she is working for somebody else. We don't know that she had been for some time, but we know that she had moved over to this company called Ohana Genetics, which was owned by a company or been bought out by a company that ironically had tried to buy us out 2 times before over the last 5 years, and we turned them down. So the plot starts thickening now, and it's more of it seems like a vindictive type situation where we didn't want to sell and they wanted us to, so they were going to get our business one way or the other.
I see.
So we called, anybody who worked for us in the field, the collectors, competitors, clients, and the clients would say, well, Heidi had come in and said that you'd sold the company, and here's the new requisition forms, and you have to use these going forward. And they said, "Are you not out of business?" They said, "We're not." And it was so unbelievable to them. It was very difficult for them to kind of conceptualize what was going on. They're saying, that can't be right. You couldn't have dropped the ball that bad. And that's where the embarrassment comes in. And we sat there and said, no, it's not an embarrassing situation from the standpoint. We just got a really, really good person out there that has woven the story that's second to none. But we ended up getting a group of people, about 5 or 6 people, including some ex-employees that weren't involved in the whole thing that she didn't like. And we went to our attorney, and we ended up getting into court and testifying in front of the judge. The judge was very fair. He listened to both sides of the story, very stern about what the law was. And then he, basically gave us an opportunity to, talk about it. But it was a struggle because every which way we went to get things done, there was always a roadblock. So we flew to Hawaii, and we had an audience, with the judge, and we had our time. And at that particular moment, there was a Category 5 hurricane bearing down on Honolulu, and everything was canceled that afternoon. So we had to do an abbreviated session, and then get out of town quick because we would have been trapped there. And it was just one of those, thing that every time something like that would come up, there'd be a new natural disaster at St. Mike. So
yeah,
it was the cards were stacked against us in some ways, but the truth was there. And once we started getting the truth there, we ended up getting 4 very loyal clients back, and then it started just trickling back over. And as the story kept coming out, more people kept saying, I could see this happening. I understand why she was doing this. Yeah, her stories didn't make any sense.
Okay.
And we were able to regain turf like that, but it took a long time. And there was a lot of issues with trying to look at our methodologies and make sure they weren't sabotage. All of the surveillance cameras were blown up. She took them all out. She took all the recordings out. Everything that was there for security was destroyed. Computers were gone. Everything was destroyed. We had nothing to stand on. So we really had to build a case based off of what was said.
And when you got there, all of your business was gone. Is that
That's
right?
true. Yeah.
Like
is.
all, like not just like, oh, some accounts left. It was like you were shut down for real, and everybody was told you have to go somewhere else.
It was ghost town.
Wow.
Yeah, it was the end. It looked like the end. It looked like we had lost everything. And Dan and I sat and talked about it. And I said, and he was as upset as I was about it, of course. And since he was managing Heidi, he felt duped as well. And so I said, we can't correct what happened in the past. We just have to look at the future at this particular point. And, this is kind of a war. So we've got to regain our territory in this. We didn't do anything wrong. We've always been on the right side of this. Let's go back and try to see what we can do. And so we had a great operations director here in Boston that was going to manage things from afar and, make sure that everything was getting in there the right way. He flew out to Hawaii and spent about 4 weeks getting it all together. We hired a new lab manager, a fantastic young man out of Texas, and flew him out there. And between him and we brought on another toxicologist after that and revised everything right away, got our CAP certification back. That wasn't even an issue. They had actually come to us and said the findings didn't look right. So, we understand what you're going through. We sympathize and we're more than willing to support you. They were fantastic. They were more than human about it. And so all the cards kind of fell in the right way. We just got the right people and we've recapped a lot of it. Now we're not back to where we were prior to, but I would say that our profitability is back to where it was. So I think we've actually done a better job in managing the laboratory at this particular point, but it's because the really strong team that we have out there.
And George, when you said that the judge was really fair and listened to both sides, I kind of got confused because you've got the salesperson, Heidi, and then you've got this company that is the acquirer that acquired it for whatever they had to pay her, I guess. I don't know. So who are you in front of the judge with?
So it's Dan and myself, and then our team, the people that came back that, could testify to say that was going on. So they were there in the courtroom. And then Heidi was there. She had a tech that she brought with her that was in the know and knew everything that was going on and basically draining out a lot of the insight into how we built the lab and using that technology to build the new lab. So it was those two. And then the next gen lawyers were there. And they were told, basically what was going on. We don't know for sure. They've never actually admitted that they knew that Heidi was working for both sides, but it's hard not to, knowing that what her background was, and they knew that she was with us before, but they've never actually come out and said, we acknowledge the fact that she did that and she did it intentionally. That's neither here nor there at this point. So
yeah. Okay. So and the amount of business that went out the door was millions of dollars. Millions of dollars. Huh. Yeah, that one, you got to take a deep breath on that one.
Yeah, you don't feel so good. You don't eat for a while.
Right. Yeah. I think everybody listening who has had circumstances, situations with salespeople who leave their company and all sort of feel entitled to taking something with them, usually a business, because you have to hit the ground running at whatever your new employer is, and they feel like there's, certain ownership to their customers, right? That even though they have no ownership in the customer, but they feel that way. So I know I've had that happen, and several times I had one guy that was sort of contracting himself to our customers while he was working for us and representing us with the customer. It was like two separate contacts, so kind of not anything like what you had happen, but it's out there, right? And I guess I wonder what your feeling is on that, just as a general sort of thing, because this is to the extreme where it feels like she felt like the business was hers and not yours.
And I think that a lot of sales reps kind of feel that way. And I think a lot of employees feel that way, no matter what industry you're in. I mean, you could look at just this past weekend that Tom Brady feels the Super Bowl was really his, right? And at this point, it really is his. So,
Yeah.
He left a team and it kind of left them in a place where they don't want to be. And it's kind of the same situation. But I think when, what you learn from something like this is that, and I can't really tell because I've never had a post termination conversation with her as to why would you do something like that? Because you were treated super well. She may not have liked the setup with mainlanders running the show or whatever, but she never really said that. So and if somebody had offered her more money, she certainly could have come back and asked us for more. The business was a very successful business. We had a great standing. We do have a great standing, probably better now than it ever has been. But there's a lot of things that she could have done that were different. And I guess there's, the lesson to be learned is let's try to find out what makes our employees happy and loyal. And then realize and try to put that into play and keep people like that. And then there's just some cases where there's nothing you can do at all. I mean, there's people are not happy. They're not going to be happy until, they move on to something else and try to take something away from somebody. I have no problem if she wanted to move on and go to a different company and wanted to face this head on and go after our business that way. But this was a completely different scenario with a lot of background that just didn't make any sense. So, but if she wanted to compete against us, that would have been fine. I would not have had a problem with that.
Yeah, and interestingly, again, not knowing anything, but if it was a mainland issue, she then partners up with a California company. That's another mainland.
It didn't make sense. Yeah, and as a matter of fact, because the laboratory that she was building out there was up and working it, they were shipping it all over to California, so it didn't make sense at all. But it just came down to the fact that, for some reason, some way, she didn't feel comfortable with us and decided that, for a little bit more money and a better program, which she thought that she was going to get. And again, I think it was more money than anything else, that she moved. And the reality is the day she took that job, she should have resigned and done it the right way. And everybody would have been fine. And they may have a business out there today.
Right.
But do it this way, that's taking shortcuts, and it's off a lot of hard work by the people that put the time into that laboratory to get it to where it was. And that's our business partners and all of the people that worked there over the years. It was a tragedy. It was a tragedy for them. These people lost their jobs. There's a lot of turmoil. We're in the addiction and recovery business. You don't throw wrenches into that business. You don't use them as the pawns in this. You don't do those type of things.
Right.
And she did. And that was very, very unfortunate. And it caused a lot of issues.
And ultimately, George, what has been the resolution to the legal side of this, at least?
There was a really, really felt like years sometimes, but we got into a settlement discussion, and it started off probably not with a big commitment on their end to get this done. But as we kept bringing more and more in and getting, getting depositions from the next gen side of people, and it was known at that point that they more or less knew what was going on, it became fairly evident that, we were in the right and they weren't. And so we got our attorneys basically sat down with them for a long period of time, and we got a settlement of $4.5 million. Okay. So that definitely helps. Did it satisfy the 2 years of lost business and the lost, goodwill on the island? Probably not, but it's, it's the best thing to move on and just rebuild our business at that point. And so that's what we're doing. And we've done a pretty good job of getting it back on its feet. It's very, very, it's a happy ending for the most part. We all learned a lot from it more than anything else, and we've extended that to our businesses and our relationships of what we have to do to be better at our jobs and be more in the know and, keep us close to our business partners and the people who work with us and what makes them happy. It's what makes everybody tick. We don't want to lose people. We want to keep good people, and it's unfortunate because, again, I've said it 3 or 4 times at this point, she was a fabulous sales rep, absolutely fabulous.
And you thought she was happy, I would assume.
What kind of money she was making and the fact that she had what she wanted and she lived in Hawaii. I mean, how much unhappy can you be?
Right.
I mean, she had everything that she really wanted. That's the part that's kind of, it's a blur to me. I just don't understand why somebody who was in that great position and had a really good solid company that was supported. I just don't understand why. It's kind of like getting jilted by a girlfriend and you don't know why. And you may never find out, but something just happened that clicked the wrong way and she went to the other side. So.
And you go through something like that and you get your business back. You do what you have to do, right? Because you can't just, you've got an investment there. You have to fight. You have to fight for it. But I wonder, even that, you get through it, does the jading, I guess, like just belief in people, it's got to take a hit.
No doubt. No doubt. And, every employee you look at now, you try to figure a way, or, any type of candidate that's coming in for a job. Do you do a personality assessment? Do you go with your gut feeling? Do you look at their background? Do you look at their references? There's no real even-keeled way or foolproof way to say that that's not going to happen again or you're going to get the wrong person. So you have to do your due diligence and you do a little bit of all of that. And, so right now what we do is we do a series of, 4 to 5 interviews before we're even comfortable with talking to somebody about coming to us in a sales role, an operations role. We look at backgrounds on everybody at this point. You kind of have to. You have to deep dive at this point. There's a number of reasons, compliance reasons, and we have a very, very, very important job to do when we're doing lab work for people.
Right.
So we got to get the right folks in there. Not that we didn't think we were comprehensive before. And if we had ended it at the 3-year mark, she would have been an all-star. She would have been in the Hall of Fame for us. But when you start looking at, what happened the last year and a half after that, something went wrong. And that's the stuff you just can't see coming. It's just like getting hit by a car. You just don't know.
Right. Yeah, you don't know, but it's you don't forget either. It's hard to forget something like that. And everybody you meet, this is just me talking, might not be how you think, but everybody you meet, you might have a tendency to put that person through the lens of that other person. Like, okay, so they're likable. Well, she's likable. So they've got a good work history. Well, she had a good work history. And, just on and on and on. And it's like, it could be almost paralyzing trying to, give someone trust again.
And that's the thing, and we talk about this all the time and we do like a features and benefit on each person that we look at right now. And somebody will always come back and say, well, remember Hawaii. It's like, remember the Alamo, remember Hawaii.
Yeah.
We don't want to get that person like that in there. And I'm like, well, where do you draw the trust line? You have to trust some of your instincts to get some people in here. And I think, that's an anomaly. I don't think that most people are like her or that situation. I don't think she's like that situation. Something happened. Love to find out what it was somewhere down the line and find out, what caused all that. But, I think it was just one of those anomalies, and you have to go back to the trust situation and go with your instincts and do all your backgrounds, do the stuff that you're supposed to do. But to get people employed and get them out there and be productive and trained. And I would say to anybody that's listening today, just keep a short leash for a while until you can really build that trust up, and then keep going from there. But you can't give up, and I think we did a pretty good job of getting the right people out there right now, and the folks that we have running the show are just fantastic right now. So So that gives me the faith. That gets me over the hump there.
Okay. And have you thought any harder about actually moving to Hawaii so that you're closer to that than?
The one thing I learned was this, that if you really love a place, don't put a business there.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Can take the edge. Yeah.
Keep it a vacation spot and just go and enjoy it.
Well, it sounds like despite all the pain and all the fighting and everything else, and despite the fact that things aren't the way they were before, you seem optimistic and happy about where you are with it right now. And I was going to say everything considered, but even without everything considered, it seems like you're like in a good spot to move forward.
Well, I think you'll learn a lot from this. And one thing that came out of this is that, when you're trying to drive a wedge into between four, not only owners, but friends, and that it didn't work, sometimes that bond gets a lot tighter too. So, you become more friendly with them, and realistically, we get along so well at this point. I don't see that changing. And, we've turned this thing around. The settlement really didn't matter that much because it was really we had to use all that to go back in and invest and keep building the company. So, there's a lot of bills. Our legal bills were super, super high, but even our attorney believed in us, and we developed that friendship with that group out there, and we trust that they're directing us in the right way when we need that type of help. And they were fabulous about the whole thing. They kept in touch with us the whole time, even to this day. So it's worked out really, really well, and we're using all of these resources now to build a better company. We focused a little bit more towards COVID, and we've done some testing out there with that. We're doing some more supplies. We've got some innovative new devices that we've come up with that are really cool. We've got a mask that kills COVID on contact.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. I want to, let's shift a little bit. So we got we got all the ugly stuff out of the way, and you're still standing. And I know Dan's still standing. So that's the win there. So let's learn a little bit more about what you're working on and how your business has changed, post COVID, I guess, because before that I know you have all different kinds of things, but drug and alcohol testing is a big part of the business, both on the sales side and then on the laboratory side. Am I correct about that?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
And basically what happened when we had a little bit of a forewarning on the COVID situation because we dealt so much with the Chinese. And of course, they had it about 3 or 4 months before we did. So we had a little inkling that this was all going on. So we started looking at, we actually had calls about masks. Where can you find a mask for us? And we've never been in the mask business at all. I knew nothing about this. I said, well, just, call McKesson or call one of them. I'm sure they have. Nobody had them. This is in October of last year. So this is pre, pandemic. So
because they weren't being made here in the U.S., they were only being made in overseas, right? And
nothing was made here.
Everything was just in time. Like, why would you ever need more masks than you have, or something? Is that?
Everybody was in a normal ordering pattern, and there was no shortages. And it's again, one of those perfect storm situations where not only do you have the virus coming over, but all the protective equipment is made over there as well.
Yeah, right.
And they're going to use it all for themselves over there first, which you can't blame them. I mean, they had the pandemic, they had the virus first. So of course they were using it all over there. And next thing you know, you see the prices going up, and instead of at, 18 cents, now they're at $4. And we're like, well, how did that happen? Well, that's when we started saying, I think there's going to be a problem. And I said to Dan, I think this stuff is for real. I think we better, keep an eye out on this and start getting ready to pivot, because if it goes down, nobody's going to go in for drug testing. And, the secondary piece on this is if nobody's going in for drug testing, that means that this whole problem is going to explode, and there's going to be more addicts and more suicides and more things like that going on. Well, we were right. And that's exactly what did happen. So we pivoted. We started looking for point of care materials that would fit the marketplace to do quick testing. There was nothing at the time. They were using the stuff that we were buying from the Chinese, was not super accurate at the time. It wasn't specific for COVID-19. It was for SARS, but not COVID-19. Okay. It gave you a little bit of a leg up, but it didn't do the job that it really needed to do. So we put all of that on hold, and then we just started looking at more protective devices, like going back to looking at masks and gloves and things like that. But all of them became corruption like I've never seen in my life. How to get these things in the country, and it just didn't fit our profile. So we just got away from it. We just stopped doing masks and gloves. And what we did was we decided to go into more of like UV light testing, UV light cleansing, sanitizing for hands, temperature control units for buildings and things like that. So that was the first part of our year. And that's just a much easier business to work, and it's just as important. So around March, April last year, I was in contact with a gentleman out of Wyoming, and he was working down in Vietnam, and they developed a mask that has a molecule built into it that actually kills COVID on contact. And so he kept bringing it to my attention, and they were doing the trials on it. And I said, well, when you get some white papers, you could tell me about it, because otherwise it's just a story. So he ended up getting white papers. We've got them from the University of South Florida that show that does kill COVID. We can't say that as a marketing tool at this point, because the FDA doesn't allow that, but it did get its CE, and we are marketing it as it does neutralize about 99% of it. We've done some independent studies on it. It definitely works. So we're really excited about this. Obviously, this problem is not going to go away soon. I think as of this morning, only 10% of the population were vaccinated. So there's a long way to go. And if you do it in a time frame, you're still looking at about another year and a half, probably, unless they really ramp this up. And then again, you got the variants, so you don't know how the variants are going to be affected in all of this.
Sure.
So what we're trying to do,
no vacciners too, so you don't know how that's going to shake out.
We don't know. We don't know if it's going to cause more problems or less. And that's not our area. It's not our area to discuss. Our area is to get our business, our core business, our drug testing back in, to get people back into therapy, to get their medications to them on time, to do it in a cost-effective, succinct way that's compliant with everything the government wants. So there's a lot of little hoops to jump through. But how do you do that? Well, you've got to have some protective devices that work, and we do believe that this mask does help with that. We do our, the fever warn testing products that you walk into a room and it actually takes your temperature before you walk in, and either lets you in or doesn't let you in. So We're trying to really help these offices get back on their feet again and make things work. So I think these are things that are going to make a big difference. And at the same time, let's look at the future. What is the future of medicine and drug testing and addiction and recovery? It's changed. It's completely changed. And people really used to have to go down and see their doctor to get their medications. Now they can't do that anymore. So telemedicine has taken off in a big way. And, before the catalyst of telemedicine, nobody really wanted to do it. Everybody really wanted to go in and see the doctor. Well, this has been force fed on us now, and it is cost effective. It's super cost effective, but you can't do a drug test. So we've come up with a couple of new ideas with that as well. And we're signing on with a new laboratory that does finger stick blood technology, which is really cool. And it's not adulterable, and it gives a clinical value of how much actual drug you have in your system. So you can help manage your patients better this way. So these are the type of things that we're looking at to circumvent all the problems that are out there right now. And we're about to launch. We're probably going to launch that next week. So we're really excited about that. So we learned a lot. We learned a lot in the last 3 years, and it's been exciting. And with great chaos, provides some great opportunities as well. So, and the best thing about it, it's very cost effective. We don't want to see big bills go out to people, and we don't want to tax the healthcare system. We want to do it better. We want to make a better program that people can live with, and that everybody can be tested. So.
And just a question on the masks. These masks they're non-mechanical, right? There's nothing producing anything, like an ultraviolet light or something like that. It's just a mask that's been coated with some type of molecule.
It's actually a molecule. It's called molecule 215, and it's actually woven into the fiber. It's a reusable mask. You can reuse it for 90 days or 30 washings, one or the other. It fits really well. It's very breathable. It's got terry cloth feature to it right now. It's an ear loop technology, goes around your ears. So
it's basically genetically modified, whatever the woven material. It's genetically modified. I don't know.
It's basically a cloth. that has the
Yeah,
molecule built into it. And what the way a virus works is that everybody's seen the pictures of what the virus looks like.
Yeah.
It's got spikes on it, and that spike is what attaches. And then when it attaches, it opens up and the RNA goes into your system. So once you breathe it in, it gets into your lungs, and then that's how you get infected. What this does is when you put the mask on, it hits that and it breaks it open. And once the RNA is out, it's ineffective. It has to attach.
Okay, so the RNA is on the mask then instead of in your body.
And it dissipates right away.
Yeah. Okay.
So we have case studies on it. We've got some really nice marketing pieces on it. The person who's in the head of the operations does a lot of teleconferencing with us right now and showing us how this works. Got a lot of people interested. It's a metric change for sure. But, one of the things that I saw last week, which I felt was kind of impactful, we're talking about the impact of surgical masks and throwaway masks on the environment. And I'm not necessarily the biggest environmentalist in the world, but when I see wildlife with an old mask hanging off its neck, I got to say something's wrong. Right. And those masks all have a plastic liner in them. So those plastics are going to end up in the same place where all the other plastics end up. And it's not palatable at all. This is a reusable mask. It's better for the environment. It's a little bit more cost on the front end, but if you look at it over the period of the 90 days, it works out to be about 11 cents a day. And that 11 cents is what the pre-COVID masks actually sold for.
Okay. Well, plus you're actually getting something where, there's a sort of a lot of discussion about whether most of the masks that people are wearing are doing anything anyway, and I know it's how it's worn and stuff, but a lot of it is how it's made. What is it actually built to do?
Exactly. And this is what we call a living mask. We've labeled it the Warrior's Mask because we're fighting COVID. So that's how we've labeled it for us. And we're real excited about it. We're getting into our launch period here soon. And again, we want to make sure that everything we do is just done the right way. And this actual material can be used in almost anything. You can make surgical gowns out of it. You can make boots out of it. You can do anything. So anybody who's interested in taking that on can be set up with that without a problem. They are going to be made in the United States very soon. Right now, they're made in India and in Vietnam, but we're getting ready to they're going to be opening up a factory, I believe, down in Texas sometime in the future. So,
okay. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the drug and alcohol testing methodology. You sort of mentioned the finger prick thing. So that's blood is harder to mess with than urine, I guess, and maybe some other things. And I read somewhere where you had mentioned, that people, users and addicts, they have a lot of creative ways to try to mask, their usage, right? Because they know they're going to be tested or whatever.
Right.
And this blood thing would help with that, right? Because it's hard to adulterate with blood. I'm wondering, is there a future beyond that, George, where there's, at least from your experience, where there's a wearable or something that could be attached to someone that's completely non-invasive, so you don't have to, take someone's blood, but is effective. Like on the Super Bowl there was a commercial for glucose
diabetics.
Monitoring.
Yeah, I saw that.
Wearable, right?
Yeah.
So glucose right now is typically tested the way that you were just describing. You prick your finger, you put it in a little machine, it tells you what your glucose is. Now there's a wearable that tells your phone. I'm just wondering if, because I've been seeing all kinds of cool stuff about how wearables could, predict cancer, and they could do all kinds of things on an earlier basis than others. I'm wondering what being in the position you are, if you've seen something like that for drug and alcohol.
It wouldn't surprise me at all to see things like that as this happened. And when I saw the commercial, I think it was one of the Jonas Brothers.
Yeah.
And my wife and I looked at each other, because my wife worked with us as well. Looked at each other, said, that what you're saying, that would be a great technology for what we do. Right. And I'm sure that probably if you're going to be able to do that with glucose, that you're probably going to be able to expand on that. It all comes down to what the bigger guys want you to do, because there's a money component in this as well. And when you have some of the bigger labs out there that make a lot of money on these type of things, they kind of just don't want you having some of that technology out there. But I think if you can get this thing into a manageable situation and get everybody into a succinct way of being tested, it's only better for everybody to get, for the wellness part of this whole thing. So
Yeah.
it wouldn't surprise me a bit to have that. I think 2 or 3 years ago, we heard about finger stick technology and the problem that Theranos had. And granted, well-deserved from what I hear, but, now we're 3, 4 years ahead of that, and that technology is now coming along, and they're able to show comparison studies, and they're doing it the right way. So this technology is going to probably take off, and it's super for telemedicine, just fantastic for telemedicine.
Well,
where you can't do an observed urine collection on the internet. That's a whole different game that we don't want to get into at all. So, but with blood, you can.
Well, and plus it also if it does go to wearable. So I'm thinking about like how ankle bracelets changed how the government looks after people that are on parole or whatever, right? You used to have to like knock on the door, like, are you here?
Yeah.
Right. And now they don't do that anymore. It's telling you all the time. And I look at drug and alcohol testing, particularly, as a someone who's had DOT drivers for most of my career. There's most of them, stay away from that stuff, but some of them don't, right? And you get somebody on a program, they have to go regularly to be tested, let's say, but it's not regular really. It's every so often where, if you had someone on that needed, medicine to help them with their addiction or whatever, just so I look at something wearable and I say, okay, then you're having data all the time that's really helpful for intervention, right? Like, it's not going to keep the person from doing it, but you don't have to be believed anymore, right? It's like, here it is. This is what's happening. So let's not even deal with whether you did it, whether you didn't. We need an intervention here because there's something happening, and because the device is telling us all the time. We don't have to find you, or you don't have to catch you, I guess is the word, right? You don't have to catch them.
And I think when you're talking about therapy and you're talking about what are you really looking for? That's the deal on this. And DOT obviously is a different game. You don't want to be impaired driving, and that's the health of other people. But when you're in the recovery business, what's the real goal here? Are you trying to throw somebody out of a program? Is that your goal, to throw everybody out? No, your goal is to get people well. And the easiest way to do that would be with new technology. I read this morning that there's a new breathalyzer for marijuana impairment coming out. So, that in itself would be a game changer, and especially in DOT. So it's okay, everybody in the States are saying it's okay to smoke marijuana, but it's not okay to be impaired because it's the same thing as driving impaired with alcohol.
Right.
So, now you're going to have a way to maybe monitor that as time goes on, which is a gold mine for whoever developed that program.
Sure. And just because you brought it up, I mean, now that, so you see all the test results, I mean, has the adoption of legal marijuana in many states, has it impacted increased the number of positive drug screens on a general basis?
There's no doubt. Yeah, that's gone up quite a bit. But again, people don't care now. So unless in the recovery business, there's really 2 areas that you have to look at. So most people know about the 12-step program. So, that the 12-step means abstaining. So you can't do anything. And the other one is harm prevention, which means that you're using things like methadone and buprenorphine, and marijuana is not a big deal. It helps with anxiety, and people go along with that. I think marijuana, I'll get yelled at for this, but I still think it's kind of a gateway drug. I think that you have to be responsible, just like alcohol. If you're going to use it, you have to be, past the age of 18 to 21 in that range, because your brain's still formatting in those years. Right. I just don't believe that anytime you take too much of anything bad, it can affect you. So I think there's still a long way to go in understanding what this is. But, as far as gateways, if you're 14, 12, 11, 10, and you're around marijuana, it can have a harmful effect on you, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe it too. I don't know how you could not getting high on something when you really aren't able to process what that actually means is probably not a good thing. Getting high on anything.
I agree. And the marijuana today isn't the marijuana of the 60s and 70s. So
that's what I
it's
keep
a lot
hearing.
more powerful. So
Right.
it's completely different game, and it stays in your system for quite a while. So, I think that the impaired market is going to change with some new, innovation technologies. I think what you're talking about, even on the Fitbit side of things, where, Fitbit can read just about everything you're doing when you're exercising. It's only a matter of time before it's going to be able to start reading, what you've taken and how that affects your body, how
Right.
to respiratory, how it affects your blood pressure. I'm sure that's all going to come out one of these days soon.
Yeah, because if you're taking drugs or alcohol or whatever, you sweat it just like you excrete it in your saliva and in your urine and stuff, right? In your blood.
Yep.
So imagine there's a way to capture that somehow. I don't know.
Well, you can always test sweat. We can do that now. It's just not the preferred way to do it. It's not where, the real numbers are coming from.
Yeah.
You can do it through hair. You can do it through a lot of different things. So.
Okay. Well, George, this has been a fascinating conversation. We got to a bunch of things. I'm glad we had the chance to go through the story of the Honolulu, or is it Honolulu where the lab is? Hawaii.
Yeah, it is.
Honolulu. Because that's, like I said at the beginning of it, I mean, that's something that we all fear as business people. We maybe it's not an everyday like, oh my God, I'm really scared, but you got it in the back of your head, and then you hear this kind of story, and you're like, wow, this can really happen.
Most people just look at me and they go, how could that possibly happen? That's not true.
Right.
I don't believe it.
Right. Yeah. And everyone who says that can have it happen to them. Guaranteed.
No doubt.
Guaranteed. Maybe not to the same extent or whatever, or maybe to a worse extent, but it can happen for sure to everybody. So I do appreciate you coming on and sharing that particular story. And then I'm glad we had the opportunity to get into the rest of this stuff. We could probably do another show about everything that we didn't get a chance to talk about. Maybe we'll do that as well sometime. But this has been a great I really do appreciate you coming on, and thanks for sharing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having us today. And, we're really excited about the future. We don't get down, you just got to fight it back out. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about human nature, like you said. And, I feel like I'm a better person because of it at this point. And I know that, my colleagues, Dan and Aaron and Peter, we all feel the same way. So we're excited about the future. And again, we appreciate you, taking us on. Let's tell the story.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the How Did Happen podcast, where we believe that success doesn't happen unless you make it happen. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you like to listen. And while you're there, please rate it and leave a comment as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the show, ideas for future guests, or whatever you'd like to share. And of course, you can always find me at MikeMalatesta.com. See you next time. Thanks again for listening to the How Did Happen podcast.